I never thought I'd step foot in that house again. Not after the way my children looked at me 9 years ago, like I was a stranger who'd ruined their world. Back then, I left without saying goodbye. I told myself it was for the best. Maybe time would make them understand why I had to go. But time didn't heal, it just made the silence louder. When I got the invitation to my son's daughter's birthday, my hands trembled so much I almost dropped it. Grandma, it read in messy little handwriting. Not from my son, not from my daughter-in-law, from my granddaughter Lily, the one I'd never met. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe they'd sent it by accident. But deep down, I wanted to believe it was real, that someone in that house still remembered me with love. So I packed my old suitcase, the same one I took when I left, and boarded the first bus home. Every mile felt like a question I didn't want to answer. Would they even open the door for me? Would they still hate me? The house looked smaller than I remembered. The garden I used to tend was overgrown. The white paint on the fence cracked and faded. I stood there for a long minute, listening to the wind and the faint sound of laughter inside. When the door finally opened, my son Daniel stood there, taller, older, but with the same eyes as when he was a boy. Those eyes once looked at me with love. Now they looked confused, maybe even angry. "Mom," he said, barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard. "Hi, Danny, I got an invitation from Lily." He didn't move. For a second, I thought he might shut the door. Then, from behind him, a small girl peeked out, her hair tied in two clumsy braids. "Grandma?" she asked, smiling like sunshine breaking through rain. That single word shattered every wall I had built around my heart. I knelt down, tears blurring my vision. "Yes, sweetheart, it's me." Daniel turned his face away. "Come in," he said quietly. "She's been waiting for you." As I stepped inside, every memory I'd buried came rushing back. The night I left, the shouting, the tears, the promise I broke. But something felt different this time. There was warmth in the air and tension too. A storm was coming and I could feel it in my bones. Little did I know that invitation wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about uncovering the truth behind why I was forced to leave in the first place. The house smelled of vanilla cake and memories. I could hear laughter coming from the living room, but it wasn't the same laughter I remembered. It felt polite, rehearsed. Lily took my hand and pulled me toward the table. "Grandma, I saved you a seat next to me," she said, her tiny voice full of pride. Her excitement was pure, untouched by the bitterness that lingered in the adult's eyes. I smiled and sat down, though I could feel the tension ripple through the room. My daughter-in-law, Claire, froze mid-sentence when she saw me. Her smile faded as if someone had turned off the light inside her. She looked at Daniel, and he gave a quick nod that said, "Just let it go, for today." I pretended not to notice. I'd learned long ago how to survive silence. The table was covered in balloons and half-melted candles. Everyone tried to act normal, but their glances spoke louder than words. I kept my focus on Lily. Her joy was my only safe place. "Grandma," she said between bites of cake, "Daddy said you used to sing to him when he was little. Will you sing for me too?" My throat tightened. That voice I hadn't used in years suddenly wanted to break free. "Of course," I said softly. I hummed the lullaby I used to sing to Daniel, the same one my mother sang to me. As the melody filled the room, I saw Daniel's eyes flicker with something, pain, maybe regret. When I finished, Lily clapped and hugged me tightly. "You sound just like I imagined," she whispered. For a brief second, everything felt right again. But then Claire stood up. "Daniel, can I talk to you?" she said, her tone sharp but controlled. They both stepped out of the room, leaving me sitting there with Lily. Through the thin walls, I could hear their voices rise. "She shouldn't be here," Claire hissed. "You remember what happened last time, what she did." "I know," Daniel replied quietly, "but Lily wanted to meet her. She has a right to know her grandmother." Claire's voice cracked. "You think she deserves that after disappearing? After?" I stopped listening. My chest tightened with shame, the kind that time never fully washes away. I looked at Lily, still happily decorating her cupcake. "Sweetheart," I asked gently, "what did your daddy tell you about me?" She looked up, crumbs on her lips. That you went away because you were sad, but I'm glad you're better now." Her innocence cut deeper than any accusation ever could. I smiled through my tears. "Yes, love, much better." Before I could say more, Daniel returned, trying to mask the tension in his face. "Mom," he said carefully, "can we talk later? Alone?" My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. It was the same one he used the night I left, only this time there were more secrets behind it. That night, as I sat in my old room, I found something under the bed that changed everything I thought I knew about why I was pushed away. The room hadn't changed much. Same faded wallpaper, same creaking floorboards that whispered with every step. But time had stripped it of warmth. The photos on the wall were gone, only faint outlines remained where the frames once hung. I sat on the edge of the bed, tracing the worn fabric of the quilt I'd sewn years ago. Every stitch carried a memory I'd tried to forget. I thought about Daniel's face at dinner, how he looked torn between two worlds, the man he'd become and the son he used to be. As I reached down to place my bag under the bed, my fingers brushed against something hard. I pulled it out, an old wooden box, small enough to hold in my hands, covered in dust and age. My heart skipped. I hadn't seen it since the day I left. I hesitated before opening it, afraid of what memories it might unleash. Inside, there were letters tied with a red ribbon, yellowed with time. The handwriting was Daniel's, childish at first, then sharper, older. Letters I never received. I unfolded the first one. "Mom, are you coming home soon? Dad says you're busy. I kept your scarf. It still smells like you." Tears blurred my vision. I picked up another. "Mom, I don't understand what happened. Everyone says you made a mistake, but I don't believe them. I just want you to come back." My hands trembled as I read the last one, dated years later. "Maybe they were right. Maybe you did what they said, but part of me still hopes you'll prove them wrong." The words hit me like a storm. I had left to protect them, but they'd grown up thinking I'd betrayed them. And the person who had twisted that story, who made me the villain, was the one person I once trusted more than anyone. I wiped my tears and closed the box, clutching it to my chest. A faint sound came from the hallway, a creak, then footsteps. Daniel stood at the door. "You found it," he said quietly. I nodded. "You kept them." He stepped closer. "I didn't have the heart to throw them away." He hesitated before adding, "There are things you don't know, Mom. Things Dad never told you." My breath caught. "What things?" He looked over his shoulder, making sure no one was listening. "He told everyone you took something that didn't belong to you, that you ruined him." I froze. "He said that?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "But I don't believe him anymore. I found something in his old files, something that proves you were protecting us, not abandoning us." The words felt unreal. For 9 years, I'd carried the guilt of being their disgrace. Could it be that all this time, the truth was buried under lies? I looked at him, my voice trembling. "What did you find, Daniel?" He hesitated, eyes full of fear and determination. "It's not something I can just tell you. You need to see it yourself." The next morning, Daniel took me somewhere I never expected, to the very place where all the lies had begun. And what I saw there shattered everything I thought I knew about my own family. Morning came wrapped in silence. The air outside was cool and still, the kind that makes you feel something big is waiting to unfold. Daniel didn't say much during the drive. His hands gripped the steering wheel tight, his jaw set, eyes fixed on the road. We stopped in front of an old warehouse on the edge of town, the place where my husband, Richard, once ran his construction company, the same business that collapsed right before I left. The sight of it made my stomach twist. "Why are we here?" I asked quietly. Daniel sighed. "Because this is where it all started, and where Dad's lies began." Inside, the air smelled of rust and forgotten years. Broken tools lay scattered, papers crumbled in corners, and sunlight cut through the dust like sharp beams. Daniel led me toward an office in the back where a metal cabinet leaned half open. "I found these last week," he said, pulling out a folder thick with old documents. "Dad kept records of every payment, every project. But look at this." He handed me a file labeled Hale Family Trust, my name printed neatly at the top. I opened it and froze. The papers showed a transfer of all company debts under my signature. Except, I never signed those papers. My voice shook. This isn't mine. Daniel nodded grimly. I know, the handwriting's close, but not exact. I had it checked. Dad forged it, Mom. He put everything in your name so when the company fell apart, you'd take the blame. I staggered back, my heart pounding. He did this to me? He told everyone you drained the accounts and disappeared. Even Claire believed it. I pressed a hand to my mouth. The years of pain, the silence, the hate, it all made sense now. I left because he said I'd be arrested if I stayed. He told me it was for your safety. Daniel's voice cracked, and you believed him. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. He said he'd fix it if I disappeared. I thought leaving was the only way to protect you. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The truth hung heavy between us, ugly, real, and finally free. Daniel placed his hand over mine. It's not too late, Mom. We can tell everyone what really happened. We can clear your name. I shook my head slowly. No, Daniel, this isn't about clearing my name anymore. It's about healing yours. He looked confused. What do you mean? I gave a small, tired smile. You spent 9 years believing your mother was a liar. Now you know the truth. That's enough for me. Before he could respond, the warehouse door creaked open. We turned, and there stood Claire, her face pale, holding Lily's hand. Lily wanted to see where you two went, she said, her voice trembling. But I heard everything, and I don't know how to face this. I met her eyes. You face it by not hiding anymore. None of us should. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. Then let's start today. But just when I thought the past had finally stopped chasing me, someone unexpected walked through that warehouse door. A face I hadn't seen in nearly a decade, and the last person I ever wanted to meet again. The sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse, steady and familiar. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. My heart knew that rhythm too well. Still running from ghosts, Margaret? That voice, it was colder than I remembered, roughened by years of pride and bitterness. I turned slowly. There he was, Richard Hale, my husband, the man who turned my life into a story no one believed. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were the same, sharp, watchful, calculating. The silence that followed was unbearable. Daniel's hands clenched at his sides, and Claire instinctively pulled Lily closer. I stood tall. You shouldn't be here. Richard smirked. It's still my property, and last I checked, you're the one who walked out. Walked out? I stepped closer. You forged my name, destroyed everything, and told our children I stole from you. He didn't even flinch. You think anyone would have believed the truth? You were already halfway gone, Margaret. Always too proud, too soft. Daniel's voice cut in. Enough. He stepped forward, holding up the folder we'd found. I know what you did, Dad. I've seen the documents. I've spoken to the bank. For the first time, Richard's mask cracked. You think anyone cares about old papers? He snapped. Daniel looked him straight in the eye. No, but I care, and I won't let my daughter grow up believing lies the way I did. Richard's gaze flicked to Lily, standing half hidden behind Claire. For a second, something almost human crossed his face. Regret, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. You can't rewrite the past, son. No, I said quietly, but we can stop it from poisoning the future. Richard looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You always had a way with words, he muttered, then turned and walked out, the door slamming behind him. The echo lingered like a final chapter closing. For the first time in years, the air felt lighter. Daniel exhaled deeply, his shoulders dropping. It's over, he said. I smiled faintly. Not over, son, just finally honest. Claire stepped closer, her voice soft. Margaret, I owe you an apology. I believed everything he said. I touched her hand. You believed the story you were told. Now we get to tell a new one. Lily slipped her little fingers into mine. Grandma, can you sing again? The happy one? I looked down at her and nodded. My voice was shaky at first, but as the tune filled the warehouse, I saw Daniel close his eyes and smile. It wasn't just a song anymore, it was a promise. A promise that healing had finally begun. As we walked out into the sunlight together, I looked back one last time at the place that had held so much pain. It no longer looked haunted, it just looked empty, waiting for peace to settle in. I thought that chapter of my life was finally closed, until a letter arrived the following week, with Richard's handwriting on the envelope. And what it said inside left me questioning everything all over again. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones we once trusted with everything. But healing isn't about revenge. It's about finally setting yourself free. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. And remember, every story has two sides until the truth finds its voice. I'm Auntie May, and this was another story from the heart. See you in the next one.